The sheriff looked my father dead in the eye and said, "You picked the wrong daughter." Yeah, that's how it ended. But 3 months earlier, I was standing outside in the cold on Christmas Eve, holding a gift I never got to give. So let me ask you something. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What would you do if your own family shut the door on you, like you never belonged there in the first place? The house looked the same, warm lights glowing through the windows, garland wrapped around the porch railing. That same fake wreath my dad refused to replace for 10 years. From the outside, it looked like a perfect Christmas. Inside, something was already off. I could feel it the second I stepped through the door. "Hey," I said, me holding up a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I brought—" "Didn't think you'd show up?" That was my dad, Richard Reyes, 58, standing in the kitchen like I'd just interrupted something important instead of coming home for Christmas. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, I said I would." He didn't answer, didn't hug me either. And then there was Dylan, my younger brother, 24, sitting on the couch scrolling his phone like he owned the place. "Wow," he said, not even looking up. "Didn't know they let farmers take holidays." I laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because I'd heard versions of that my whole life. "Still doing that ranch thing?" he added. "Yeah," I said. "Still doing that?" He finally looked up, smirked, like I just confirmed exactly what he expected. Dinner didn't help, if anything. That's where everything started to crack open. My dad kept talking, loud, proud, about Dylan, his future, his plans, his investments. Apparently, he was getting into real estate now. Apparently, my dad was backing him, financially. Of course he was. I waited. I let him finish. Then I asked, carefully, calmly, "What about the land deal you said you'd help me with?" And just like that, the temperature dropped. My dad didn't even hesitate. "You chose your path," he said flatly. "Don't come back expecting handouts." Handouts. That's what he called it. Not support. Not a promise. A handout. I felt something shift right then. Not anger. Not even hurt. Something quieter. Final. Dylan laughed under his breath. "Maybe if you did something real," he said, "you wouldn't need help." Something real. I nodded slowly. Took that in. Let it settle. And then my dad said the part that actually mattered. "You're not staying here tonight." Just like that. No discussion. No hesitation. "Excuse me?" I asked. "You heard me," he said. "This isn't your home anymore." Silence. Heavy. Thick. Final. No one argued. No one stopped him. Not even for a second. So I stood up, picked up my coat, left the gift on the table, and walked out. The cold hit hard. Sharp. Immediate. But honestly, not as sharp as what just happened inside. I got into my truck, sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, breathing slow, steady, controlled. And here's the part that might surprise you. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even look back. Instead, I said something out loud. Quiet. Simple. "Okay." A pause. And then I'm done. And I meant it. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a revenge-fueled way. Just done. Because what they didn't know, what they never even bothered to ask, was that I hadn't been struggling. I hadn't been waiting. And I definitely hadn't been depending on them. I drove off that night, not toward nowhere, but toward something I had already started building. Something they knew nothing about. And 3 months later, they showed up smiling, standing on land they thought was theirs, planning to sell it like I didn't exist. But they missed one thing, one very important thing. I never left empty-handed. So how did my own father end up trying to sell land that didn't belong to him? And why did I let him walk right into it? They thought I left that house with nothing. Mom, that was their first mistake. You ever notice how the people who underestimate you are usually the ones who never really looked at you in the first place? That was my family, especially my dad. To Richard Reyes, I was always the difficult one. Not loud like Dylan, not charming, not needy in the way that made him feel important. I didn't ask for much, and maybe that was the problem. People like him don't know what to do with a daughter who stops begging to be chosen. So, when I left home for good at 22, he treated it like a phase. Like I'd fail, get tired, and come crawling back. I didn't. I worked. That's the part no one ever sees when they've already decided who you are. They don't see the 5 a.m. shifts, the field inspections in freezing rain, the cheap apartments with bad wiring and worse heat, the skipped vacations. I had the nights eating leftovers at my laptop while finishing certification courses because one more credential meant one better contract, and one better contract meant one step closer to not needing anybody. I built my life the boring way, slowly, painfully, on purpose. I finished my agricultural degree while working part-time, then full-time, then more than full-time. I got into land use consulting, which sounds dull until you realize farmers, developers, and county offices all need someone who understands soil reports, water access, easements, and zoning. I became useful. And useful pays, if you're willing to outwork people. Meanwhile, Dylan stayed exactly where he'd always been. At home, close to my dad's wallet. He jumped from one big opportunity to another, a landscaping business that lasted 4 months, an online flipping course, a truck he couldn't afford, then some kind of rental property dream my dad started financing because apparently confidence counted more than competence in that house. And every time Dylan failed, it was never really called failure. It was called potential. Funny, right? When I struggled, it meant I wasn't good enough. When Dylan crashed, it meant he just needed more support. So I stopped telling them things. Not because I was hiding, because I was protecting what mattered. 6 months before that Christmas dinner, I bought land. 18 acres. Not inherited. Not gifted. Not borrowed through family connections. Mine. I still remember the first time I drove through the gate after closing. There wasn't much out there. A weather-beaten ranch house, fencing that needed work, our brush creeping along the edges, and a stretch of open ground that looked plain to anyone who didn't know what they were seeing. But I knew. I saw privacy, space, control, peace. I signed every document myself. Every page, every fee, every inspection. No cosigner, no rescue. No father standing beside me pretending my success somehow belonged to him. And I told no one in my family. Not one word. That included the address. That included the purchase. That included the fact that I had already started renovating the house room by room, paycheck by paycheck. New locks first, then repairs, then fencing, then cameras. Good ones, too. Motion triggered, cloud backed, time stamped. I wasn't paranoid. I was practical. Rural land teaches you that fast. If something goes wrong, you need to know exactly when it happened and who did it. When looking back, there was one moment I should have taken more seriously. A few months before Christmas, my dad had called out of nowhere and asked a string of oddly specific questions. Not about me. Never about me. About rural land. What acreage was going for. Whether undeveloped parcels were moving fast. How hard it was to transfer ownership if land had been in the family. At the time, I remember pausing, just for a second, because the questions felt too pointed to be casual. But then he brushed it off, said Dylan was exploring options. I let it go. I shouldn't have. Still, even then, a part of me knew something was off. Richard didn't suddenly care about land values unless he thought there was something in it for him. After Christmas, I cut contact without making a speech about it. No dramatic text, no confrontation. And I just stopped reaching, stopped calling, stopped checking whether they noticed. And out on that ranch, my life got quieter, cleaner, better. Then one afternoon, I pulled into my driveway, opened the mailbox, and found an envelope from a real estate firm I'd never worked with. At first, I thought it was junk mail. Then I saw the property description, my property description, and just like that, the air changed. Because somebody, somewhere wasn't just looking at my land, they were making plans for it. The letter wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. I stood there by the mailbox longer than I should have, just staring at it. You ever get that feeling where something is wrong, but you don't know how bad yet? That was this. The envelope was clean, professional, typed label. No handwritten notes, no confusion. Line, this wasn't spam. This was intentional. I opened it right there. Didn't even make it back inside. And the moment I started reading, my stomach dropped. Pending property evaluation and listing preparation. Listing. Preparation. My land. Not a question, not an inquiry, a process that was already moving. I flipped the page. There it was. Legal description, parcel number, exact acreage, 18 acres. Mine. So let me ask you, how does someone start preparing to sell land that isn't theirs? I didn't panic. That's important. Because panic makes you sloppy. And something about this, it felt too deliberate for sloppy. I went inside, set the letter on my kitchen counter, read it again. Slower this time. Every word, every line, looking for anything that explained how this even started. And then I saw the firm name again. Local, reputable, not some scam operation, which meant one thing. Someone had convinced them this was legitimate. So I called. The woman who answered sounded normal, calm, routine. Thank you for calling. Hi, I cut in. I received a letter about a property listing. I need to understand why my land is being evaluated. A pause. Not long, but enough. Can I get the parcel number? She asked. I gave it to her. More typing, then silence. Longer this time. And when she spoke again, her tone had changed. Slightly tighter, more careful. Ma'am, can you confirm your name? Samantha Reyes. Another pause. Then, oh. That one word told me everything. They knew something was wrong. I'm going to need you to explain, I said, voice steady. She hesitated. Nyunmin, here's the thing. People hesitate when they realize they're standing in the middle of something they shouldn't be part of. Finally, she said it. We've been working with Richard Reyes. My father. Of course. I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of shock, out of confirmation, because now it made sense. What exactly has he told you? I asked. That the property is a family-held asset, she said carefully, and that he has authority to initiate the sale. Authority. That word almost made me laugh. Because here's the reality. His name wasn't anywhere on that deed. Not as owner, not as co-signer, not even as a reference. He doesn't own that land, I said. Silence. Then a quiet. I see. But it didn't stop there. Because the next part? That's where it got worse. There's already a showing scheduled, she added. My grip tightened slightly on the counter. When? This weekend. Not weeks from now, not theoretical, immediate, active, moving forward. Who's the buyer? I asked. Another pause. A development group? Of course. Developers don't waste time. They don't look unless they've already been told something is available. And the purpose of the sale? I pushed. She hesitated again. Then, it was explained that the proceeds would be used for a family investment. I didn't need her to say his name. I already knew. Dylan. So let's lay it out clearly. My father, who threw me out of his house on Christmas, was now trying to sell land he didn't own to fund my brother, using a story that I was somehow irrelevant to my own property. That's not a misunderstanding. And that's a plan, and here's where most people expect the reaction. The yelling, the confrontation, the emotional explosion. That didn't happen because anger would have tipped them off, and I didn't want that. Not yet. Instead, I asked one final question. What day is the showing? She told me. Saturday, 10 a.m. Perfect. I thanked her, hung up, and stood there in my kitchen, very still. Then I reached for my phone again, not to call my dad, not to warn anyone. I called a lawyer, Sandra Liu, 45, sharp, precise. The kind of person who doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't need to. I explained everything. Forwarded the letter, gave her access to my property documents. She called me back within the hour, and the first thing she said, "This is serious." Good. Because I wasn't interested in pretending it wasn't. We went through everything. Ownership, documentation, what he'd claimed, what he'd initiated. And then she said something that shifted everything again. If they proceed with this showing, they're exposing themselves. Exposing. Not just wrong, not just inappropriate, legally exposed. Do we stop it? I asked. A pause. Then, that depends, she said. What do you want to do? I looked out the window, at the land I paid for, built on, protected. And I thought about Christmas, the door closing, the silence, the assumption that I would just disappear. Then I said the only thing that made sense. No, a beat. Let them come, because if they wanted to act like it was theirs, then they could do it in front of me, in front of my lawyer. I'm in front of everything they didn't know I already had in place. And just like that, this stopped being a problem and became a setup. So what happens when people walk onto land they think they own and realize they've just stepped into something they can't control? They didn't sneak onto my land. They walked in like they owned it. Saturday morning came quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no traffic, just that still, open-air silence you only get out on rural land. The kind that makes every sound carry a little farther than it should. I was already awake, already dressed, already waiting. Let me ask you something. If you knew someone was about to cross a line, would you stop them? Or would you let them step over it? So there's no denying what they did. I chose the second. By 9:42 a.m., I saw the first vehicle. Black SUV, clean, unpolished. Not from around here. The realtor, right on time. I watched from inside the house, not hiding, just not announcing myself. Yet, at 9:57, another truck pulled in. That one I recognized instantly, my father's. And right behind him, Dylan? Of course. They parked like they'd done it 100 times before. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just confidence. That quiet, dangerous kind of confidence that comes from believing no one's going to challenge you. The three of them met near the gate. I couldn't hear everything at first, but I didn't need to, because the cameras could. Every angle, every word, time-stamped, recording. I moved to the monitor mounted near my kitchen wall. 3 feeds, driveway, fence line, front approach, and there they were, standing on my land. Talking about it like it was theirs. Great acreage, the realtor said, looking around. A lot of potential here. My dad nodded. Yeah, it's been in the family a while, he replied smoothly. In the family, not his, not ever. Dylan kicked at the dirt with his boot. You could clear this whole section, he said. Level it out, subdivide if zoning allows. Subdivide. He was already spending money he didn't have, on land he didn't own. The realtor started filming, walking slow, panning across the property. Future listing preview, she said into her phone. That's when something in me went still. Not angry, not shaky, just precise. Because this wasn't speculation anymore, this was evidence. They walked deeper in, closer to the house, closer to me. I stepped back from the window, not out of fear, out of timing. My phone buzzed. A single message. Sandra Liu? We're in position. Good. Another sound followed. Faint at first. Easy to miss if you weren't listening for it. A siren. Distant, but getting closer. Outside, everything shifted. You could see it in their body language. The pause. The slight turn of the head. The confusion. What's that? Dylan asked. My dad frowned. Probably nothing, he said. But his voice wasn't as steady anymore. The siren grew louder, closer, unmistakable now. And then, the realtor stopped recording, lowered her phone. Is someone supposed to be here? She asked. That's when I moved. I opened the front door. Slow, deliberate, letting it creak just enough to be heard. All 3 of them turned, at the same time. And for a split second, no one said anything. Why, because the one thing they didn't expect was me, standing there, on land they thought I'd disappeared from. Dylan blinked first. Wait, what are you doing here? I tilted my head slightly. What are you doing here? Before either of them could answer, the siren cut through the air one last time. Loud, sharp, final. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up beside their vehicles. Then another. Doors opened. Boots hit the ground. And just like that, the balance shifted. My dad straightened, trying to recover. Trying to put that confidence back on like it hadn't just cracked, but it was too late. Because this moment, this exact moment, was the one I'd been waiting for, and they had no idea how far it was about to go. Who called the sheriff? What did they already know? And what happens when confidence meets proof? The moment the sheriff stepped out, everything they thought they controlled started falling apart. The cruiser doors shut with a heavy final sound. Not rushed, not chaotic, controlled. That's the word. Everything about what happened next was controlled. The sheriff walked forward first, mid-50s, calm, observant, the kind of presence that doesn't need volume to take over a situation. Two deputies followed behind him. And just a few steps after that, Sandra Lou. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice, didn't even look surprised. She walked like she already knew how this was going to end. Now, here's the part you need to understand. This wasn't random. This wasn't me calling the police in a panic 5 minutes ago. When everything had been set up before they even arrived. The letter, the phone call, the confirmation, the scheduled showing. Sandra had taken all of it and moved fast. Filed a formal notice of fraudulent representation. Flagged the property with the county. Alerted the sheriff's department about a potential unlawful transaction in progress. And most importantly, documented everything. So when those cruisers pulled up, they weren't guessing. They were responding. My dad stepped forward first. Of course he did. Still trying to lead. Still trying to control. "What's going on here?" he asked, forcing confidence back into his voice. The sheriff didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at Sandra, then at me, then back at my dad. "You Richard Reyes?" he asked. A beat. "Yes." Another pause. All right, and then, "You're attempting to sell property you don't own." No yelling, no accusation, just a statement. Clear, direct, final. And just like that, everything cracked. Dylan stepped in quickly. "Hold on, that's not what's happening." Sandra spoke for the first time. Sharp, clean. "It is exactly what's happening." She held up a folder. Documents already tabbed. Already organized. "Deed is solely in Samantha Reyes's name," she continued. "Filed, recorded, and verified. There is no shared ownership, no transfer, no authorization." The realtor's face changed first, confusion, then realization, then something closer to fear. "I was told," she started. "I'm sure you were," Sandra cut in. "And that's part of the problem." The sheriff extended his hand. Sandra passed him the documents. Meanwhile, I stepped forward. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just enough to stand clearly in front of them. My dad finally looked at me properly. Not past me, not through me. At me. And for the first time that day, he didn't look certain. "Samantha," he started. I didn't let him finish. "You told me I had nothing," I said. Calm, even, a small pause. Just enough to let it land. "This is what nothing looks like." Silence. Real silence this time. Not the kind from Christmas. This one had weight. The sheriff closed the folder, looked directly at my dad again. "We're going to need you to step aside." That's when it shifted from uncomfortable to real. My dad wasn't arrested on the spot, but he was detained, questioned, separated from the situation he thought he controlled. The realtor, she was shaken, pulled aside, Alma explaining what she'd been told, what she'd documented, what she hadn't verified. Dylan? He didn't say much after that. The confidence? Gone, replaced with something quieter, smaller, and all of it. Every second was recorded. By my cameras, by their devices, by the reality they couldn't talk their way out of anymore. Because here's the thing, people don't show you. Moments like this don't end when everyone leaves. They unfold. Within days, the real estate firm opened an internal investigation. The listing process was formally canceled. The development group backed out immediately within weeks. My dad was facing potential fraud charges related to misrepresentation. The realtor's license was under review for failure to verify ownership. Dylan's investment opportunity? Gone just like that. Financially? Namit hit them hard. Deals collapsed. Reputations shifted. And for the first time, they couldn't smooth it over. Personal fallout. There was no apology, no dramatic reconciliation, no moment where my dad suddenly understood everything he'd done. Just distance, clean, permanent. He tried calling once. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, out of clarity, because some lines, once crossed, don't get redrawn. Final resolution, weeks later. The ranch felt different after that. Not because it changed, but because everything around it had. The fencing was finished, reinforced, stronger than before. The cameras, upgraded, expanded coverage, not out of fear, out of certainty. And at the front gate, I added something new, a sign, simple, clear. Carter Ranch, private property. Yeah, Carter, not Reyes. When because names? They only matter if they mean something. And standing there, looking out over 18 acres of land I built, protected, and kept, there was one feeling left. Not anger, not revenge. Ownership. Complete. Undeniable. Untouchable. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I never needed them to begin with. And that moment, the one with the sheriff, the one where everything flipped, that wasn't the end of something. It was proof that they were wrong about me. From the very beginning.